The Bank of Ghana has maintained the monetary policy rate at 30% after reviewing developments in the economy, and this means that the lending rate in the country will remain steady. It is the second time the central bank has held the rate in a year after doing the same in May 2023. After the rate was hiked by 50 basis points in July due to inflationary pressures, the market turned towards policy rate retention on the back of the ease in inflation for the month of August. Meanwhile, in all of these, Ghana has recorded a 9 percentage points drop in its total export earnings. And as of August 2023, total exports stood at 10.76 billion US dollars. It is lower than the 11.81 billion US dollars recorded in August 2022. This morning from Accra, Ghana, I'm being joined by Patrick Baah Abankwa, a financial analyst and investment advisor. Thank you so much, Patrick, for talking to us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone.
What were the key economic indicators that informed the decision of the Bank of Ghana to keep its monetary policy rate at 30%?
I think that the two key factors that Bank of Ghana used to maintain the policy rate, one has to do with inflation. If you realize, we started the year with an inflation moving around, went as high as 50.1. But the last 2 months or so, inflation has dropped, and as we speak, inflation is around 40.1% as at the last count, which was last month. So the reduction in the inflation was a factor that Bank of Ghana used in maintaining the current monetary policy. The second one has to do with the depreciation of the cedi. The cedi has been fairly stable against the US dollar in recent times. This has helped improve help reduce imported inflation over the period. Financial stability has also been a factor that Bank of Ghana used to maintain this policy at the moment, because the Ghanaian financial sector remains stable in spite of the debt exchange program, and most of these banks are recovering from the shocks that they experienced because of the losses due to debt exchange program for last year. And when you look at the half-year performance of these banks, most of these banks are recovering, and they are getting strong capital buffers, and also the capital and liquidity ratios of these banks have also improved. So a combination of these factors is the reason why Bank of Ghana maintained the policy rate as it is.
As we see it, Patrick, all core inflation measures monitored by the central bank are trending downwards, indicating continued easing of underlying inflationary pressures. But some economists believe that these will be short-lived as we approach the festive season, including unsettling global market pressures. So do you also agree, and are you also thinking in this direction that the possibility of these inflationary pressures might increase again as we tend towards the end of the year?
Yes, so when you study the Ghanaian economy, there are seasons where inflation picks up, and also seasons that the inflation improves. So yes, I agree that this performance is a bit short-lived, because it's possible that the short-lived nature that we are seeing now will pick up as the festive season also comes up. And normally in Ghana, the festive season is typically a time of increased spending, which leads to higher inflation. Additionally, the global market pressures, such as the war in Ukraine, rising cost of living, could also continue to have an impact on inflation as we head towards this part of the year. Normally, within September, October, November, December, the cedi depreciates so much against any other period within the year. So we should begin to see some kind of a heavy toll on the currency and also inflation as we head towards this time of the year.
So whether it rises or falls, that would mean that the MPC would definitely have to begin to react to whatever trajectory the inflationary the inflation rate goes. But then if we are to look at the central bank's decision to stay the policy rate at 30%, looking at the economy now, do you think these particular policy statements will be formidable enough to repel any form of internal or external shock that might ensue in the coming months and probably bring about stability, or we should just take it as it comes?
I'm not too sure if we have seen a great impact of the hikes in the monetary policy that the central bank has done so far this year. I mean, we started the year at around looking around January, we are around 18% in terms of the monetary policy rate, and now it has risen up to the point of 30%. The question is, what has been the impact of that on inflation in the country? Inflation has appreciated within the period. It's only just last month and a month before that we saw inflation stabilizing. I'm not too sure the impact of the monetary policy is being felt as we expect. It's rather putting so much pressure on the businesses in the country. Currently, on the average, the lending rate in the country is around 36%. When you break it down, that's about 2 or 3% per month for these businesses. And these businesses sometimes are competing with foreign companies. And if these foreign companies are enjoying rates of about 18% from their home country, and they come to Ghana and they are competing with Ghanaian companies who are enjoying around 36%, 38%, it means that on the back of that, they are taking off the business. So even though monetary policy sometimes is to push spending power of people so that people will not spend that much and inflation will come down, in our case in Ghana this year, I'm not too sure if that has been the overall benefit that we have enjoyed as a country based on the policy that Bank of Ghana initiated from the beginning of the year.
Now that we're seeing that speculations breathe uncertainty, we see that economists are also saying that the rising international crude oil prices and adjustment to utility tariffs remain a risk to the inflation outlook. So just as you have expressed that you are not too sure, what do you now think the Ghanaian Apex Bank should do in terms of preemptive measures against these possible external and internal threats?
I think what the Apex Bank can do, to be honest with you, is that they should begin to look at what best practices they can use to shore up our reserves. Ghana's reserve over the last 6 months or so has depreciated because of how Bank of Ghana has to go in to support government spending. So if government wants to support the economy through Bank of Ghana should begin to look at how they can rake in more reserves through encouraging foreign direct investment into the country. Again, another thing that Bank of Ghana should begin to look at is that what are the support that the banks are giving to industry. If the banks are giving support to the industry, then the industry will now begin to go in, expand their business. And as they expand their business, especially in the export sector, we begin to get in more inflows of foreign currency. For me, these are the measures that central banks should begin to put in place to encourage how the economy has been so far this year, which for me is not quite encouraging, and it needs a bit of a boost, both the central bank and also the government itself.
Well, though it's not encouraging, but then we see these inflationary pressures ease as it comes. But then doesn't it seem as though there's a bit of a challenge with the gold sector? Because earlier on you talked about the need to increase exports, and that's basically one of the major ways by which a government can gain revenue. Now, it lost about $1 billion in total exports. That's looking at the gold sector now. What would you say are the factors responsible for the about 9% decline in the figures in that sector?
So the decline in gold exports in Ghana in 2023 basically can be attributed to a number of factors. The first one is that globally, the price of gold prices have also gone down. The price of gold has fallen in recent months due to a number of factors, including the rising US dollar and the expectation of higher interest rates in the US. So that has caused the price of the gold to go down. Again, there has been reduced production of gold across. Ghana's production has fallen in recent years due to a number of factors, including depleting of our oil reserves and also rising costs. Again, the issue of smuggling has still not been eradicated in the system. We have people smuggling gold out of the country, which does not go through the official means. And for that matter, we are not able to get the revenue out of that. And also the revenue that we are supposed to get out of exporting, we also not get it. So these three factors, among other factors, for me, is a major factor that has caused our revenue that we are getting from the gold production to go down. So the lower gold price on the global market, then production has also gone down, and also the issue of smuggling.
All right. Now, Ghanaian gold is also said to be a dominant force and a very significant contributor to the country's total exports. But then you have mentioned a couple of issues affecting that sector. What has been the efforts of government to deal with these issues of low production, the rise in the dollar rates, and all other attendant effects? And how would you also describe the investments of government in this particular sector? Because it seems as though this sector has been threatened by these issues.
Yeah, so I think on the whole, the government has invested heavily in the gold sector in recent years. And this has helped the sector to boost their production over the last 5 or so years, except this year that we have seen the production going down. However, the recent decline in gold prices and the reduced production could threaten government's investment in this sector, because if you look at the investment that government has done in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security, in terms of even liaising and getting higher market for gold producers in the country, as against certain sectors that perhaps if the same effort was channeled towards these sectors, government would have gotten more revenue out of that. Then government would begin to now look at if they should still continue to send the same quantum of investment into the gold sector as against maybe pushing it into the service sector or perhaps the agriculture sector, which continuously employs about 54% of the workforce in Ghana.
Now, this brings me, Patrick, to the next question that has to do with how diversified the Ghanaian economy is, because we see that gold was the only item in the export basket that saw an increase among other sectors. It improved to about $4.67 billion US dollars from $4.22 billion US dollars. But then when we look at other sectors like the oil sector and probably the agri sector, so I'd like to find out from you how diversified is the Ghanaian economy in terms of investments, in terms of what is able to produce, and of course in terms of revenues that should accrue from these other sectors?
To a large extent, I would say Ghana's economy is still not very diversified. I mean, gold remains Ghana's most important export commodity, which is followed by, of course, cocoa and oil. Other sectors like the agricultural sector, manufacturing, tourism are relatively, for me, underdeveloped. They haven't still gotten to that point yet. This makes Ghana's economy vulnerable to shocks in the global gold market. And that's what we have seen over the last 12 months or so, where international shocks has direct impact on the economy and inflation begins to shoot up. The fact that gold was the only item in the export basket that saw an increase in 2023 is a sign that other sectors are not playing catch up. It means that they are still lacking behind in terms of what they can support and contribute to the economy. And this is a concern, if you ask me. And it means that Ghanaian economy is still heavily reliant on gold export. But the point is that when we get to a point where we are not getting the production that we need from gold, then the economy will begin to suffer the most, even beyond what we are experiencing at the moment.
Well, another part, another side to it in terms of what can be generated in revenue is cocoa exports, which was said, of course, to have gained about 1.6 billion US dollars, but then there's been a marginal dwindling of resources in that area. So maybe the Ghanaian government would have to look into that aspect too. But then Patrick Abankwa, I want to say profound thank you to you for joining us and for talking to us this morning.
Thank you too for having me on the show.